Now, we all know that most movies based on video games generally tend to suck. But what about video games based on movies? Yeah, those kinda suck too. Welcome to Trending 10, and today we're counting down the top 10 worst video games based on movies. Now for this list, we're going to be going over video games that were created to coincide with a theatrical movie release. So, Superman 64 is safe from this list, as it's technically based on a TV show. It's still the worst of all time though. Number 10. Friday the 13th. Kicking off our list is this little gem released in 1989 for the NES alongside the 8th film, Jason Takes Manhattan. The game had an original story following a group of camp counselors trying to fight off Jason and protect their campgrounds. Now, this game was truly a nightmare. It was repetitive, the music was annoying, Jason looked stupid, and it was way too difficult. Now, maybe that was the point, since Jason is pretty much unkillable in the movies. But why would you make a video game this difficult? It's just no fun. Now, this game has gone down in history as one of the worst games of all time, and for very good reason. Let's hope that the new Friday the 13th game, set to release in early 2017, gives the masked killer a better name in the world of video gaming. They could bring back the cabin song though. That was cool. Number 9. Terminator Salvation. For all intents and purposes, this should have been an awesome game. A third-person Gears of War clone that lets you take control of John Connor as you venture across a post-apocalyptic Los Angeles and blow up Terminators? Come on, it should have been a blast. But alas, it was not. The game was only about 4 hours long. It was way too easy, the enemy AI was awful, the graphics were terrible, the voice acting was laughable, much like these videos, and the only way to play it was the story mode, meaning that you paid a $60 full price for a 4-hour lackluster campaign and nothing else. In fact, Christian Bale, who played John Connor in the movie, refused to lend his voice or likeness to the game. Now that is truly the sign of a bad game. Number 8. Saw, Flesh and Blood. The Saw franchise is one of the most successful modern horror franchises we have, and it seems that it should have translated well to the world of video games. And the first one, surprisingly, somewhat did. The first Saw video game was praised for its atmosphere and story, but criticized for the actual gameplay being pretty sloppy. So, when the sequel was announced, fans were excited to see if the gameplay would be fixed and the story would be as good as the first. Saw Flesh and Blood was released in October of 2010 and was a massive flop. While the gameplay was improved from the first game, all of the elements that made the first game enjoyable, including the atmosphere, the environments, the story, and more, had been completely dumbed down and replaced by bland, generic combat missions, and the game ended up being a cheap action game rather than a survival horror title. Let's hope that if we ever get a third Saw game, the developers figure out a good balance between story and action rather than going all in one direction or the other. Number 7. The Karate Kid. Now, the classic Karate Kid films are great, with the first and second one being the absolute standouts. So it would seem natural that there would be a video game adaptation, and with this 1987 release for the NES being a side-scrolling beat-em-up amidst a literal golden age of side-scrolling beat-em-ups, it really should have been pretty fun. So, what went wrong? Well, to be frank, everything did. The game was only about 10 minutes long, it jumped around the first two movies so much that the story basically made no sense, the gameplay was clunky, and oh yeah, it's only 10 minutes long. Granted, this was the 80s, well before the blueprint of a good game was really common knowledge, but still, 10 minutes long? Who let that through? Number 6. Peter Jackson's King Kong, DS version. When Peter Jackson gave the world his take on the classic story of King Kong, the result was quite good. It was a hit at the box office and even took home a few Oscars. The video game adaptation also took many by surprise. The Xbox and PlayStation versions of the game were actually quite good as well, but the DS version was a whole different story. It was incredibly buggy, it was atrocious to look at, the level design was awful, and you didn't even have a heads-up display, meaning you never actually knew how much health you had left during missions, which is kind of essential in an action game. Apparently, Peter Jackson was very close to the development of the video game versions of his film, and was very adamant about pushing the boundaries for the visuals. But I guess no one ever told him what the hardware of the Nintendo DS was actually capable of. as the handheld version of an otherwise solid game ended up being a complete mess. Number 5. Battleship. After the success of the Transformers movies, Universal Pictures wanted a piece of the over-the-top toy-based action movies and came out with Battleship in 2012. The movie was decent and had some impressive special effects, but it was still pretty ridiculous to make an action movie out of a board game. Well, you want to know what's even more ridiculous? Making a first-person shooter out of an action movie that was made out of a board game. That's right. The video game that came out alongside the Battleship movie was a first-person military shooter that was bad beyond words. It was incredibly short, about approximately 4 hours, only had 5 weapons, had insanely repetitive gameplay. I mean, the game has the player repeat the same mission about 6 to 7 times, and mechanics that made absolutely no sense. All of that on top of the fact that the game was $60 and only had a single-player campaign, with no additional modes. And that ensured that this game was hammered upon release by critics and gamers alike. And rightfully so. It was the epitome of a cash grab. Number 4. Jumper, Griffin's Story. Bet you haven't heard anyone talk about Jumper in a while. You know, that other movie that's not Star Wars with Hayden Christensen? This game is actually a prequel to the movie, which was not really well received either. Now, you may have liked the movie as it does have some redeeming qualities, but the game is just plain bad. It's not every day that you make a game that causes critics to compare it to the horrific E.T. and suggest that it be buried right alongside it. But yep, that happened for Jumper. As a matter of fact, after Jumper, Griffin's Story was released, critic Andrew Reiner suggested that any trucks carrying it should be rerouted to the E.T. burial site. Ooh, that's gotta hurt. Number 3. Rambo, the video game. A Rambo game should have been awesome. I mean, seriously. There are plenty of ways you could make a Rambo game and it would just be plain silly fun. A jungle-themed first-person shooter, a fast-paced third-person shooter, or even a Contra-style side-scrolling shoot-'em-up. But a rail shooter? In 2014, more than 25 years after the last film it was based on, Rambo, the video game, was released. And boy, was it awful. An arcade-style rail shooter with horrible graphics, terrible quick-time events, frequent crashes, awkward audio ripping from the movies, and the game, and all of that on top of the fact that the game was insultingly short. It could be completed in like 2 to 3 hours. Widely considered one of the worst games of the 21st century, it's a wonder how this game was even made. We definitely wish it wasn't. Number 2. Catwoman. Remember that awful Catwoman movie starring Halle Berry that had pretty much nothing going for it aside from Halle looking good in the costume? And even that was kind of questionable. The game couldn't have been much worse than the movie, right? Well, you'd be surprised, unfortunately. While you could debate which one is worse, the game is still absolutely awful. It's a third-person action platformer, like many superhero games of the early 2000s, but everything that you could do wrong is in this game. Bad graphics, a horrible camera that constantly got in the player's way, a combat system that was boring and repetitive more than it was fun, and absolutely atrocious voice acting. While Catwoman got a much better video game adaptation as a playable character in the Batman Arkham trilogy, we hope she'll get her own full game to make up for this disaster. And finally, in our number 1 spot, E.T., the Extraterrestrial. Come on, you guys all had to see this coming. The game that caused the industry to crash after it was released. The game that had thousands upon thousands of unsold copies buried in a New Mexico desert in 1983. This game was just that bad. Now, it followed the legendary film of the same name. Well, at least we assume it followed the movie, since it's actually pretty difficult to determine anything that's going on in this horrific atrocity. The sound was awful, the controls were bad, the graphics were ugly, even by 1982 standards. The levels were confusing, and it's widely regarded as one of the worst, if not the worst video game of all time. If you consider yourself a gamer, you should play this game once in your lifetime as a history lesson. But after that one time, never touch it again. Never even think about touching it again. Let it stay buried in New Mexico. But alright guys, there we go. That's it for our list of the 10 worst video games based on movies. Know of any other movie video game tie-in travesties? Be sure to let us know down in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed this video, drop a like and subscribe for more great content. But anyways, that's going to be it for this one guys. Thanks so much for watching Trending 10. your guide for what's viral right now.